Hey guys, thanks for joining live on Wednesday. We kind of do different kind of topics. We don't necessarily cover the action martial arts movies, though we may. But Wednesday, we're all over the place, man. And today we got a couple of cool guests. Of course, we got the co-host Brian the Beast Robinson, and then we got Charles, actor, martial artist, and we got John, ninja, and also I guess you're really into UFOs. And we're gonna talk about some of your cool ass UFO sightings and try to make sense of them. So thanks for joining, everyone.
Pleasure to be here, man.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Yeah, so in that show on Saturday, you were popping up in the comments talking about, I think you said you had 3 different sightings, right, John?
Yeah, no, literally. And I can account for more, but the thing that I want to do is keep it to these 3 because they're the ones that stand out the most. They're the ones where it was more than just myself and the interaction involved, and then and there was also like a feeling going on more so than just some sort of that's weird up there. But I've had a dozen or so. What am I looking at? Most recent, which I did a lot of, I dig into this stuff, but like the most recent, what am I looking at was the Starlink satellites going over. It was like a line of dots. It almost looked like a spaceship armada, like going in a perfect formation just across the sky. And I'm looking up and I'm seeing these dots, and I hadn't heard about exactly what Starlink looked like at that time. So immediately I'm like, here we go. So I have a few sources, and we'll talk about that stuff that I dump it, I jump into. I kind of do that information dump. I try to find out, what I was looking at, who else may have seen it, and kind of go from there. So, but yeah, these 3 are critical.
Nice, man. And yeah. I want to know, like, well, let's save the best for last.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect. Definitely. Perfect. Can do.
Okay, let's go with that first one though, and then Brian and Charles and I will try to make sense of it. But let's go with that first sighting. Like, give us roughly the date in the area you were at.
All right. So I kind of have to take this all the way back. This is like a grade school kind of event. So
it goes way back. Okay.
Yeah, way back. Now, if this is there's a few of my friends involved with this too, so we can bring on my buddy if down the road we want to explore this. But this first one was over a cornfield near Danvers, Illinois, real small town, and there's nothing but corn out there. Okay. There's livestock around in the area. Some people do have cows, and I'll have some small beef cattle farms and that kind of thing, but mostly corn, and that's it in this area. So we're hanging out in the backyard, probably like 6th grade. I'd put this at like 1995, maybe 1994, maybe. And looking out over the cornfield as we're playing in a buddy's backyard, we see this like silverish, spherical but oblong, tall, kind of shaped like a tall oval, hanging out in the sky past what we can tell are obviously the power lines and things like that. And it was kind of like did you see, like looking and seeing it and then looking at everybody else to say, did you see that? And then looking again and not seeing anything. And we each kind of feel like what we each independently described later. And it's just funny because we talked about this so much. Our recollection of it now is a little bit different from one another. And I think that's part of the issue with sightings in like our case, is that the individual's point of view, what they're thinking at that time and how it leaves an impression upon them is going to be that critical point that differs which person kind of felt what they saw and how they're going to be able to like recall it for you later. So it's really funny because he asks me about it and I'm saying, what, isn't it tall with like a black dot kind of almost at the top, and then like it just kind of went away, like kind of as you looked at it again, like we're looking at it for no more than 10 seconds to where each of us are like, whoa, and then it's almost kind of like, and then it's not there. And it's interesting because later on, a friend of ours says, well, it had lights, you know, and then we're like, oh,
Real quick, John. What was this like in broad daylight?
Yes, this is middle of the day. Like, this is after school kids playing in a backyard next to a like a tree fort, if you will, like a we called it the clubhouse that my buddy Chris's dad built this clubhouse. We hung out in it all the time, you know, and it's cool because it was up in the air. And we do dumb stuff like it had a back door and we dare each other to jump out of the back door because it's a good like 8-foot jump, you know, we're kids. And so we jump out of it or do stupid stuff or like put the little trampoline, you know, for working out down there and then jump onto that and break ankles. So
Now, how far do you
that's what
think
we were
it
doing.
was? How far do you think it was roughly?
I'd put it out from us, like, I mean, no more than like, you know, 100 yards, 200 yards,
Oh, like a football field or two, basically, not
like a
that far.
football field or two, not far. And as far as like a size proportion goes, you know, it I saw a movie a couple years back that I was like, well, that's interesting looking because that is so similar to kind of the idea of what we saw. But if you've seen The Arrival, you know that there's like a big oblong, you know, shaped ship that shows up and kind of the bottom of it hits. But this is kind of in that similar shape and kind of is the same thing. But here's the thing. We couldn't explain why it was there and then it wasn't because we're kids. And to us, the concept of flight or something that's traveling in the air, the flights, it's a movement. You know,
Sure.
we see it, we're like, wow, that thing is flying. Their technology, man, is beyond flight. They phase. And as we get into this later, this is why I now get it because what we were seeing was what I could now kind of assume was the phasing into our reality, our place of being, to maybe observe us, maybe observe the cornfield, observe the town, because this Danvers is an interesting little BS middle of nowhere town where if you wanted randoms that had nothing, you could get them in Danvers. And so later as we're thinking, we're like, nobody really ever disappeared. Nobody ever really had, you know, like nobody really was crazy running around town saying, I've seen things. But there were just so many random folks that were literally kind of almost, if you will, faceless to the rest of the community, to where Danvers would be a perfect place to pick up nobodies, to get in and get out with somebody that you may not want. You know, you obviously don't want to like steal people. You know, you don't want to steal cows with free notice, but you could do that outside of Danvers, I think. You know, like, and so I put that out there as kind of like when you see these events taking place in rural areas and in communities that are just so small and podunk is what we used to say. This is middle of podunk nowhere.
Sure.
BFE, you know, that's the perfect place to observe without without terribly interfering with too many eyes. In this case, I think what we did observe was that phasing in and out. I can describe it as such now, but man, I wish I could take you back to when we were kids. And what we were trying to say to people is that we saw something and then it wasn't there.
Okay, so I was going to ask if it just took off real fast, but it almost sounds
right.
interdimensional, phasing in and then phasing back out.
Right. When you're running up to your the adult figures at the time in the mid 90s, you know, UFOs are things from the X-Files, which were kind of coming into hype at that time. X-Files gave depictions of UFOs moving through the sky. Everything that you've seen is UFOs going zipping across the sky. And to anybody at that time, man, you know how it is. That was our point of view of how we envisioned flight, an unidentified flying object. So you notice that the name has changed. It's now unidentified, you know, aerial phenomenon because
Sure.
they take out the whole idea of flight because it's a misdirection, if you will. And it's so crazy now that you can look at what we do know and look back at that time and say, we didn't see a UFO flying, and that's why we couldn't describe it to anybody. What we saw was the phasing of their vessel, their craft, to either come into this dimension, grab a handful of corn and make some popcorn or something. I have no idea. But we look at it kind of that way, where we were lucky to see something that nobody could explain at the time.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why they changed calling this stuff UFOs to UAPs is because of like this stigma that UFOs have, and now that we're taking it more serious, you kind of just got to call it something else in general, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, here's a question from Christopher Flynn. He says, "Who's the army dude? He's on all these chats with you all the time." Well, that's Brian the Beast Robinson, man. We do all kind of ventures together.
Yeah.
So
We're doing quests together in this simulation.
The simulation of this life game. Yeah, we're breaking out from being NPCs to real heroes in the game.
Yeah, main characters.
That's what we're doing. But hey, what do you think this this UAP was, Brian? And then we'll ask Charles. What do you think this thing was? Do you think it was an interdimensional craft? Do you think it? What are your thoughts here in the story?
Well, I think UAP is an unidentified aerial phenomenon, because it could be natural, it could be not even flying. It might just be a mirage. That's why they kind of change it. But I don't know. I think it's in the eye of the beholder. Some people may see an angel. Some people will see a UFO. Some people will see secret military craft. I mean, I guess it's difficult to say. Was it blinking in and out, or was it just some natural phenomenon? So very hard to say. I mean, there's so many things we don't understand about the universe and about how the reality we're in kind of is dictated by forces on subatomic levels we can't even understand. Spooky particles and stuff. So I guess what do you think there, Charles?
Well, I actually have. I think of it more like a craft, but I have a couple of questions. You said it was about 100 to 200 yards away. So how exactly high did you say it was?
This, this not very. If you've seen like a power line that's not your standard power, not a telephone pole, but
Okay, so those big power lines.
Big tower lines, yes, where they go and then it drips down and they that size, above it about another length of about that, so to say, I mean, an angle up, we would all have to look up at literally about a pretty decent 45 to 50 degree angle, and you'd go about that, and I'd put it up about 2 levels, because that's really the only thing we had in the area to kind of to now look back at and gauge some sort of size.
Okay, yeah. So about 100 foot high and about 100 to 200 yards away, right?
Yeah.
And you would estimate it to be about how long or wide would the craft have been?
Yeah, a kind of, if you'd envision like a, and I'm gonna say what we've always called it, like a chrome cucumber, if you will, like a
so it's more elongated. Okay.
But upright. So upright this way with
upright.
Kind of almost not like what what you'd think of as like a view shield or something that you'd be looking through, but more so just kind of a black area within it that was like fuzzy. And that's the only way I can I don't want to say fuzzy as in texture, but I mean like visually kind of like
what year was this?
A black.
Okay, that's an interesting sighting right there, because that's different.
It was like in 1995, Brian.
95.
Yeah, roundabout.
It's funny you said that, because I was telling David about a similar experience I had as a child, but with the fuzzy thing. That's really weird. Yeah, it's strange. How old were you?
I'd put us again. We were probably in that 5th to 6th grade area, because maybe even prior. No, actually, this will put us around like about 4th grade. So I'm trying to take it back in years. And that's literally like 93, 94. And like about when Forrest Gump was coming out.
Mm.
You know, it's funny you say that because when I was like 5, and I told David about this, you have, you know, as a kid, you have dreams and then you think they're real. We saw this thing, me and this kid, Peter Gardner. He was my best friend, 5 years old. I grew up in the country, so he was across the street. And we're standing in the front yard in this thing, I would say probably maybe 6 feet over our head. And in my mind, what I saw was first it was like this missile shaped thing, for almost like a what do you call it? A like a balloon, one of those
Like a Zeppelin or blimp.
yeah, type thing. But it
Yeah.
looked like a missile, just like a missile, and it's floating. And I looked at the side. I couldn't read at that age very well. I thought it said U.S. Army. You know, there was writing on the side of it, and it was fuzzy with like it was fuzzy with kind of like there was some distortion.
Yeah.
And I remember me and him running and jumping and trying to grab it. Now, years later, you know, I had even got out of the army. Peter had gone. We hadn't talked to each other in many years. We became friends on Facebook, and he reached out to me. He says, "Hey, I want to ask you something that has bothered me for all my life. It's just really bothered me." He said, "I got to ask you, do you remember this thing?" And he described exactly. I says, "Oh man, I thought that was something, you know, in my head, you know, like
Yeah.
I just thought it was something that I had dreamt in." But anyways, so something similar with fuzzy, with kind of like had a fuzziness around the outside of it, and then it would disappear, and then it would come back, and it would shimmer like that.
Weird.
Wow.
Yeah, really weird.
Wow. Sounds like an interdimensional traveler of sorts, or the creations of interdimensional I want to say species, but it's just not a word that
Yeah.
because you know it's an interdimensional entity's ability.
A blimp. That's what I was looking for. The word was blimp.
Blimp,
Sure.
yeah, you
Yeah,
know.
like one of those. Anyways.
What I saw was more of like the Led Zeppelin, if you will, kind of upright, if
Well, it's like what I
but
saw, but turned over. So it's funny you
yeah,
say that.
yeah,
'Cause
but
I remembered that one.
yeah,
Strange.
interesting. And the concept too of like a cockpit to us, like a piloting station, is something as well where to us we're going to look for, you know, where's the front of this vessel, where do I get into this vessel. These are concepts that is just it that doesn't exist. You know, you don't enter it, you become it. They enter into this. I've heard that, you know, the extraterrestrials, if you will, the aliens create in other dimensions and then bring that manifested reality dimensional shift and phase it into or dimensional shifting ability, phase things, let it be tactile, like an actual, like a thing. And that's why, you know, their crafts are very, you know, awkward to us. They're not
Yeah, the Tic Tac, or some of them.
Ex-
You see them the jet. There was one that they were chasing, and it had. It was really,
yeah,
you know, a few design. I wouldn't look at it like a cool for a movie, but now that we're getting into that,
yeah.
Charles has got a lot he wants to say about DNA and the Anunnaki and humans, and that's
When I
I'm
heard
sure
you were
you got
getting
a
into
lot to
that,
say
I was
about it.
also stoked. I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a great show.
So I don't know.
Thoughts on what you think that was, Charles? That craft.
That craft that he saw. Well, did he? Okay, so he had 3 different sightings. Were they kind of the same, or?
You know, I gotta say that the second one is absolutely 100% different, because the second sighting was more. I was into high school at this time. In fact, I want to say I was a freshman. I was hanging out with a friend of mine who was a senior. So I'm going to put this at about like 2000. I'm sorry, rather this would be about 1998, 1999 time frame. And I'm hanging out with a friend who just graduated or is about to graduate. But I remember we're driving to Bloomington on this long stretch from Danvers to Bloomington, which is pretty much a straight road in Illinois, heading east. And again, cornfields just everywhere. And looking over cornfields, we see, you know, there's different facilities that we do have in these areas. So, for example, there's an ammunitions disposal company that was called Donovan Demolition, ran by a childhood friend of mine, Zach Donovan's father. This Donovan fellow was a contractor for the government, and local word was that he also did crazy operations during Desert Storm, Desert Shield, was a tunnel rat kind of guy digging around and trying to find Saddam back during those days, but came up with a pretty revolutionary way to dispose of ordnance. And this idea as well, he developed a way in which to molecularly connect in like high impact type of manner, like two steel rails being smashed into each other. Essentially, he came up with a new way to like weld rails together for various railway stations, other things. And what he ended up doing was he copyrighted this. Okay, so he had some early 90s copyrights. He had an ordnance disposal company, a lot of things. And we're driving right by this place. So if you go to Danvers on the map and you now look it up, there's going to be a big warehouse just to the northeast of Danvers, set about kind of a few miles outside of town. And as we're passing this, we're driving in a Tacoma, like kind of gold color. And I'm looking out the window as my friend is driving, and I'm in the passenger seat looking past him. And I see, I look, and what I see is what looks like a box kite that's kind of, it's a square, but rectangular and long. So if you've ever seen a box kite with a really long tail, kind of looks like that. And this thing is literally doing loop-de-loops and huge aerial acrobats, and has the lighting of like a rainbow, like a disco in the air. Okay, this thing was a light show and an aerial acrobatics show. And what I'll do is what I was gonna do was I was gonna draw all this stuff out for you guys and then like hold it up, but then I realized I'm like, this isn't gonna work out. So it's something that where if I could take you to an idea where it's kind of you have to take a square tube. So we're looking at square tubing, but arranged like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then and they go back this way, and these are square. So I mean, literally like a huge box kite, and you can not see through it. Obviously when it's this way, but when it is this way, those boxes are this. It looks like dude, it was an effing box kite. Okay, like, and here's the thing about this one. I'm looking at it. This thing's doing backflips and is like as colorful as a rainbow and just flashing all these different colors and doing the craziest things. And James looks over at it and says, I don't know what that is. And I said, yeah, but that's effing, I mean, look at it, dude. He's like, I'm not gonna look at that, dude. No, I don't know. And he's going, it's a crop duster, dude. And I'm like, bro, and then I'm like, okay, maybe, because crop dusters are like, there's some bi-winged old school crop duster guys out there, but they don't do backflips and flip around in the air and have a light show. They don't have. I'm like, no, dude, this is not a crop duster. Like, look at it. And he just, he would not look at it, man. And recalling this later, there were so many times and instances, I'm watching documentaries and digging in and doing my digging as well. And I'll talk about where people can kind of do some further research or report things when they see them like this, because that's something I wish we had back then. I would have been reporting these things way back then.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. we told people, I tried to tell people all the time, what I'm seeing. I said, James's dad was, I was Johnny, man. I just showed up and was an idiot. I was no good at basketball, sucked at video games, could barely skate, started rollerblading, which was even more stupid. So, I had a lot going against me in the little town that I hung out in, to where we were already kind of goofy and stupid anyway. and we did dumb stuff. You know, we were into the Beastie Boys and would wear jumpsuits and walk around town acting like idiots and just be goofy. So whenever something that I would say, like this would come about, there's nobody going to take me seriously. I'm the boy who cried wolf for everything at that point. So it's interesting that I look at it now and I think these things, I'm like, man, if I could have reported it, I so would have. But now people, there's resources. So I'm going to throw this out there because there's the Center for UFO, it's like reporting, like I want to say it's Center for UFO. I can't remember what the S stands for, but that's a good one to start when you report these sorts of things to this CUFOS. That goes to the AARO, and AARO is this anomaly reporting office, and it's directly related to all the three letters. So you have to imagine, NSA, CIA, FBI, all these guys have a department dedicated to either receiving this information in some way or being able to divulge the information outward somewhere else. Like they're, hey, we got this report, we got to get it out of here. They're going to have a field agent who's going to handle that at some sort of level in each department. So the AARO is a great way for them to centralize and kind of if you will, decentralize, I suppose, that kind of network and be able to say, okay, well, we can funnel it all into here. It's like it's like a modern day Project Blue Book, if you will,
Right.
But open source.
Yeah.
And so again, CUFOS is and that's, I've got it here because again, acronyms, dude, are something I just drives me nuts. Once I got out of the military, I was like, I'm never calling anything Milstat or
Right.
I'm not doing it anymore.
All right.
But yeah, Center for UFO Studies. So
Great.
definitely dig into that.
Yeah. So maybe maybe we can get Charles to talk a little bit here about I'm interested to hear about the DNA and the Anunnaki.
So yeah, if you want to go into that, let's do it. So around 450,000 years ago is when the Anunnaki pretty much came to Earth, right, from Nibiru. By the way, we don't live in a single star solar system. We actually have we're actually binary. We have two stars, and I got in a lot of trouble for saying that, by the way, because we're not in the Milky Way. We're actually living in what's called Sagittarius, mini Sagittarius, which is starting to combine with the Milky Way galaxy. But anyway, so from Nibiru, the Anunnaki came here, obviously looking for gold, and so they took the hominids that were here, and they were working with them, and they spliced the DNA. They obviously took the chromosome number 2, which is now scientific proof. They have proof that this was changed. That this was done in a laboratory because evolution can't do this, right? So they cut they spliced chromosome number 2, switched it, and combined it. And they also put caps on the telomeres, changed the lifespan of people as well, and they developed
when you
the
say
Homo
they
sapiens
changed
thinking.
the telomeres, they shortened them.
They shortened them. They capped them to shorten the lifespans. Yeah, because if you remember back in biblical days, they lived 6, 7, 8, 900 years. Methuselah was 999 according to the Bible. And so the Anunnaki didn't want the human beings that they developed. The Anunnaki took the Homo sapien and they wanted them not to have those kinds of lifespans.
Quick
So they
question though, Charles. Like, why wouldn't it be better if we lived longer? If they got created?
No, because they didn't want, because they're the gods, right? No, but the gods didn't want us. First of all, we already were made. We were created in the image of God, right? And that's what the Bible says. The God created us, and so they created us in their image, right? So which means we have that in us. We are all gods in ourselves, and so they didn't want us to have those lifespan. Now of course, according to the Bible, there's other reasons for that. Because this person sinned or that person sinned, but But in reality, what they wanted to do was just keep the lifespan short because they didn't want us. They didn't want us to have the lifespans that they had because they were the gods. So they didn't want us to be equal to them, even though they gave us that essence to have godlike powers and things like that. So we do have that in us and our DNA. And of course, science says we have junk DNA, right? And so the junk DNA, it's not junk DNA. We have DNA that are of the gods. And as we explore and learn more about that scientifically, we're going to realize that we have so much more about who we are and what we are. And that's what we're trying to figure out now. That's where we're heading.
Well, how do you know
So
they came 450,000 years ago? Like, where'd you
yeah,
get that info?
Because well, that's where okay. So they had gold mines and stuff like that. They were here long before that, obviously as well. So like 450,000 years ago, up to like 250,000 years ago,
hey Charles, are you talking
250,000 years
about
ago.
Eric von Däniken's book? Is that out of Chariots of the Gods?
So I don't know if that's in that book or not. I've
Yeah,
read
because
it.
he
I
no,
don't
no,
remember if
I
that's
didn't
in
know if
there.
you were. Yeah, he talks about that. Anyways, go ahead. That's interesting. Is he does talk about that, Eric von Däniken.
Right. So they actually the Anunnaki was actually doing it themselves. It was called the Ijiji. The Ijijis were actually doing their own mining on Earth because the Earth had a lot of gold. And so they already discovered in Africa, there's gold mines in Africa that are a million years old. So who was mining them, right? A million years ago. We're not even supposed to be that old, right? So somewhere around 250,000 years ago is when the evolution of the hominids that were here suddenly changed. And again, it's not evolution because all of a sudden, boom, 250,000 years ago, now you have Homo sapiens sapien. That's what we are today. And so that occurred all of a sudden. And again, that goes back to the Adam and Eve, goes back to what the Bible says, how God created Adam and Eve. So that's all part of that as well. So a lot of this stuff is biblical. I feel if you read the Emerald Tablets explain a lot of this because Thoth was one of the gods that was in charge of doing those. He actually Thoth did. He was in charge of building the pyramids and things like that, which came later obviously. But so yeah, the Anunnaki actually created the Homo sapiens so that they could be slave-like to them, but they gave us their knowledge, and that's where they didn't want us to have as much of that knowledge. So you had Enki and you had Enlil, who were the two gods that decided to make Homo sapien, and then of course Enlil and then Enki, they actually had a little bit of war between them over at the Adams Calendar in Africa. That's in South Africa, and that's that's a site that you should want to go see. I would definitely love to go there. And so there was something going on there. And yeah, so 200 about 250,000 years ago is when this DNA was changed. Now, ISIS also has a part in that as well, because, and this is how Genesis, this is how you explain Genesis, right? What is Genesis? The word Genesis, a lot of people don't realize this in the Bible. It's actually genetics, and Isis. So it's Genesis, and Isis was part of how the Anunnaki used Isis because they tried it a couple different ways and it wasn't working out. So they were splitting the DNA. They were working with different things, and they wanted another essence to create the Homo sapien because the other things weren't really working out. They couldn't procreate with the other beings that they were making. So there was other beings, obviously. And so they wound up using Isis, which was a god and a goddess, and she actually delivered the first child that would actually become what we call Adam. And so from there, that's how. And then they could procreate. So they finally got it right, and they finally made the Adam and the Eve of the Garden of Eden. So that's kind of how that went about.
Well, it's
What's the
interesting for me.
significance of
Oh, I'm sorry.
gold? What's this? Why gold? What's so important for them? with
So
gold.
the planet Nibiru was in a lot of they were having some difficulties with their atmosphere, so they needed gold. Gold is used for all kinds of things, right? We use gold now for our spacecrafts, and we use it for all kinds of things, but they needed it for their atmosphere. So they came here because they knew there was gold here. They came here, they wanted to get that gold to help with their atmosphere for their planet.
Well, look at this comment real quick from Chris Flynn. He said, "There's no mineral or material that's unique to Earth that can't be found in infinite abundance throughout the universe." So why do you think Earth? Couldn't they just go to some other places, probably a lot closer?
Oh, they came here.
You
uh,
can't collect such a thing
you know,
in space. You're talking about particles at that point, and in addition, yes, there are raw
yeah,
particles,
of course, they're
nickel,
everywhere.
there's copper, there's all these things are floating around in space, no doubt. And it's what we see, like the finger of God or the hand of God, which look like smokestacks in space, clouds in space. You'd have to have some sort of device that would take those raw particles and then do what something that Earth does very well, and that's create minerals. We have precious gems and stones. We look at all of our
Yep.
rocks and these things. They don't just appear. They're created by pressure and time, and the abundance of time, unfortunately, is what they don't have in order to create from the raw materials that this guy is, trying to throw down. I get where he's coming from, because he's trying to be like, hey man, but that stuff's in space. And it's like, yeah, but the ability to use it in those raw materials isn't, you're gonna have to look up what gold is made of, obviously, and then go from there. So yeah, sure, it's probably floating around out there, but what they need, I'd imagine, is in a different form. And what I imagined is early traces and just whispers of what they left behind, what we would maybe now even call alchemy.
Yeah, right.
So
Charles, do you think the Anunnaki, are they still getting gold from us, or did they leave us alone after a while? Like, whatever happened to them?
So basically, well, that's where again they left, obviously, and Jesus, I believe Jesus in the Bible had some kind of Anunnaki. Could have been half Anunnaki, could have been half human. And when he says the Christ will return, he's speaking about the Christ, the power, the God will return. So will the Anunnaki return? Every 3,600 to 4,200 years, Nibiru circumferences our solar system. So when Nibiru comes back around, which it's supposed to be coming around, I'm not sure exactly when. I'd have to look that up again. But it's between every 3,600 and 4,200 years. So, and it's been a while. It's been over 3,200 years now that they've been that Nibiru was here. So when it comes back again, though, they have the can be, and they're all over the place, actually. So there's aliens that are living underground. They're living in different areas. They're living under the oceans. So are they Anunnaki? Are they not Anunnaki? Or there's different types of races from, I believe there's 79 alien races that we know of at this point. And so there's a mixture of them. So are they here? And there's a few that's coming back, and there's some that's been here for millions of years.
Well, this is interesting when you get into the genetic, because I have a degree in biotechnology, which is kind of like genetic engineering. So it's always fascinating to talk about DNA and the mystery of DNA, genetics, evolution. There's a lot of incredible things that rabbit holes you can go down to, because we don't know. We can't go back in time to actually see what exactly happened. So it's always
Right.
interesting, the different takes and theories on how we got here and why we got here, what happened in time and in space or whatever that. But anyways, it's always fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. This whole Cosmos guy called us a bunch of flat Earth idiots, which I don't think anybody in this group is a flat earther, by the way.
Well,
You
you know,
know,
I'd like to take that as kind of
Yeah,
like,
where did that come from?
you know,
I don't know, man.
I come from a very scientific background, right? So, and David will tell you, but we don't know. You know, do I believe in the scientific principles, biology, all these things? Yes, that's, you know, my background. But
Right.
are there things that are maybe outside of what we believe? And yeah, you know, what we thought 100 years ago is completely different than what we think now, or 50 years ago. So we don't know, and it's always
Of course.
interesting to entertain. You know, I mean, I
oh
love to hear
yeah,
flat people's arguments, or you know, why not? You argue about. I'm a biologist, so you know, the idea of Bigfoot running around biologically, it's not a very sound theory, but anything is possible. So I'm willing to. So we should all be open minded.
100%.
Well, you have to be open-minded, sure. And like you said,
Definitely,
in
man.
science fiction today is science tomorrow, you know. So a lot of this stuff will become truth. You know, I'm a truth seeker, and I that's what I try to do too. And
And
I
think
try
of
to
it
use
this way. We have the US government now coming out and saying, yeah, there's things in the skies. We have no idea what that they can jam our systems. They move in ways that we can't understand. There's some intelligent mechanism behind
yep.
motion, how they're moving. There's something intelligent moving these objects. So, you know, I mean, we don't know, you know, and this is the what you have to be as a scientist too, is you gotta say, I gotta be open-minded and look at all these different things, because 100 years from now, they're probably going to laugh at everything that we thought now when they figure out what dark matter is and all these other things that are going on around us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I could piggyback too with what you know with what he's saying over here, there's so much truth to kind of how we perceive these things, and how we're able as a society to say, okay, what we're looking at, we all can make now a unified consensus or a fact of this. So sometimes people throw these just a word fact. They'll just say that's a fact. Listen, some of the oldest facts get broken when the new facts come around, because a unified consensus is going to change as people approach it differently, as research changes, technology changes. We're doing things now as a human race with quantum computing that allows you know, the binary system, a 1 and a 0, to be the same thing at the same time. Wrap your brain around that. What's that fact look like in your head? How do you envision a qubit, something that is both 1 and 0 simultaneously? And how can you think of all answers at once, extrapolate, take from, and then compute the answer faster than, in these cases, you know, computable time for us to say these things, these computations take place within, you know, unheard of time segments, you know, nanoseconds or whatever they are. So the technology now at our forefront, if you've ever seen what a quantum computer looks like, you know, like Google has one, I think it's called like Cymatic or Syntax or something weird like that. When you look at these things, you kind of have to wonder, why is it that they have to operate at a sub-zero temperature? Why do they have to operate at absolute zero, you know, 0 Kelvin? Why do they have to be that cold and operate in a vacuum? That's so interesting, because that's just like space. Quantum computing is something that was given to us from where it never existed before, in an ability for us to say, oh, hey, you know, we can just create space-like atmospheric conditions. All of these things are a process. You know, we can't be taught quantum computing before we can be taught how to create the vacuum and then drop the temperatures for which it's to be able to even operate in. You can't run before you can walk, if you catch my drift.
And
Right.
one thing I'd like to address something real quick. Somebody wrote something interesting. So anybody out here who has a background in biology, somebody wrote here that this person, Bob Dolphin, must have a background in evolutionary biology. So what they says, don't forget the symbiotic organisms. And what he's saying there is, when you look at symbiotic relationships and evolution. So if we go back roughly, let's say 3 billion, 2 billion years, I forget exactly when, you had endosymbiotic relationships, which meant organisms were, as we theorize, coming together to do things. Single-celled organisms were coming together to do things together. They had a symbiotic, which is they would help each other. And then out of this, we have in our bodies called mitochondria. Mitochondria are not found outside of any living organism anymore. But at one point, perfect, what's in our body were these mitochondria about 2 billion years ago, living separate. And they had, as we theorize, a symbiotic relation other organism. And then somehow over time, they evolved together and became more complicated. But that's what this person's talking about. It is how symbiotic relationships also influenced evolution.
Back to the DNA stuff.
Yeah, but it's interesting. And somebody said, as a biologist, somebody with a I shouldn't be feeding it, but I can say the same about religion and different things. Like, from a purely scientific standpoint, and I know religious people will go crazy, but there isn't you can make an argument that way. And I say we should be open to everything, religion, people's own theories about things. Just be open, listen. That's what makes us grow, and that's the idea of debate. We don't argue. When you start saying don't listen to this, that's arguing. Let's debate and let's listen to what people say. I may not agree with a lot of what's said, right? But I want to hear it and I want to understand it. So I think everybody should be that way.
Yeah, I agree, man. A couple comments real quick. Our buddy Antonio's here. He did that painting behind Brian, by the
Yes,
way.
he did.
The amazing artist Antonio is. He said
That's right.
Brian the Beast is an absolute genius. Could listen to him talk for hours about this stuff. Yes, he's a genius in many ways. This guy, Bra Moment. I love that this channel is into alien stuff. It's always been a fascination of mine, and it sounds like you guys too. Speaking of alien stuff, John, the third sighting. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Once you're talking about military involvement, then that's kind of where the buck drops, if you will, because this was an event, and this was like a nighttime operation, if you will, and I'm on an aircraft carrier. So what I was in the military was an aviation ordnanceman. And at this time, I was kind of entry level, if you will. So I was only an airman, and I was stationed aboard USS Ronald Reagan. That's CVN 76 for when folks are looking it up.
Now, when was this roughly, real quick? What year?
This was 2003.
Okay.
So yeah, because I had to make sure I had my times right for this one too. 2003 as well. And I could reference this to the first deck trial for the ship. So it wasn't the first time that the ship went out for any sort of pre-commission trials or anything. This was we had been out for some other pre-com tests, and this was before the vessel is commissioned as a USS commissioned carrier. So we're pre-com, if you will. And the pre-com trips out basically because we're on the other side. We're supposed to be in California as this is where the vessel's going to end up. But at the time, we're stationed in Virginia because that's where the Norfolk Grumman shipyards are. That's where they build aircraft carriers. And this is kind of just finishing its final stuff. So I mean, we still have civilians on board who are welding and finishing things and painting, etc. And us as kind of a new pre-com fleet, like getting into this or pre-commissioned, what I'm trying to say is the crew of the ship, we're tasked with military readiness. Like we have to get it up to speed, so to speak. So all the systems that are on it for all what various reasons are going to be tested, tried out, and we're going to do what's called sea trials. And that's where it was pretty critical for us to understand that we're going out pretty far and we're half defenseless, if you will. So we're generally accompanied by other vessels because we're just a huge ass aircraft carrier out there with you know what I'm saying, no rockets, we got nothing. There's no armament and there's no ordnance on this vessel. and we're out doing deck trials and things like that. So it's a smaller crew. So we had deck trials because there's two forms. There's sea trials to make sure that the boat will just get out there, and then there's deck trials to make sure that you can have flight operations. And we're doing some nighttime flight operations but we didn't have a strike force or whatever I'm trying to say. We didn't have what the hell are they called? A squadron on a flight squadron at the time. But we did have some helicopters, because helicopters, obviously they can just land. Jets is a whole different thing. So we got helicopters, and we're out and we're doing deck trials for initial, make sure helicopters can land, take off, do their thing. And we're out floating around for about a month, getting these things done in various sea trials as well. And in an evening where I'm basically walking through what's called the hangar deck, and the hangar deck doors to go to the elevators are open, and this is on the port side of the ship. So I'm kind of like, walking, and there's these two large elevators through the hangar bay, and as we all looking out, it's a vast black. You look out that window, the ocean is black, and you see stars, but they're not as bright unless you're way above deck and you can get above kind of the glare. If there's a moon out, it's stars are an interesting thing at the ocean, because only the brightest you really see, unless you have like calm nights, no moon, things like that. So sailing is a different thing, man. And I'm going to throw the shout out to all the US sailors, because it's not not easy being out in the ocean for those lengths of time, and you get a little weirded out and stuff. So people are already on edge, when you're out there for a month or two goofing around. So at this point, we have what's called a Snoopy team, which is a helicopter that can go about and look and observe anything if anything pops off. So we're half safe, and we're out there floating around. So this evening, as I'm again walking to my bunk, because every person's got their little their little hangout where you can chill, eat chow. There's a whole deck assigned for eating chow and doing all that. And then our little barracks is like, or bunk is like right up around there. And as I'm getting up in there, I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, something just feels off about this. Like it was just like a weird feeling of like awkwardness. Like we're out here, and it's like vulnerability. Like it was as if everybody just kind of feel like they're like in a, it's like you're like naked in a dream. Like they're like, everybody, like it's just a weird feeling around the ship too. The morale was really weird feeling that day. And so again, as I'm kind of like, leaving my little cab, area, I'm going across, and we look out, and we can see in the blackness a light that looks like a headlight just start to go. It just turns on, but it's like staying with us. Like, I mean, we're moving at speed. I mean, you could see moonlight and you could see the water going, because I mean, the aircraft elevator sticks out significantly far, and it's down. Like it's at the level of the hangar deck. And we're cruising, because if the elevators are up, they generally shut those doors, because I mean that's a fall into the drink right there. You know what I mean? And it's almost kind of you kind of feel air pressure like pulling out, like so you get close to that stuff when an aircraft carrier's at speed. And believe me, those things can actually go fast. I was there during deck trials, and we were just like, dude, this thing is a fucking speedboat. Like, what is going on? Aircraft carriers are berserk, man. Don't F with the US Navy. I'll tell you that. No country is gonna outrun an aircraft carrier, dude. So we're looking out, and this light goes on, and it's again staying with us. And then there's another one, like about, like far from it, but not right next, but like, they're at the same level, and then another one. And then like another one. And there's about 6 total. And they all stayed on, and they just stayed with us. And we're all kind of standing, because there's people standing there staring at them out the hangar deck doors, and we're all looking at each other like, what's that? And every sailor who's been on the ship knows that if you're doing some sort of transport of anything. Ships get right next to each other when you're dropping cargo off from one ship to another, doing any kind of transport or delivery. And these things are like critical. Like you see flaggers doing all kinds of shit when they running ships next to each other, and then they'll run some ships right next to each other, man. It's crazy. And they'll run wires across and then like fucking take cargo, and then the cargo zooms across from ship to ship. So I believe in the capabilities of these ships, and I don't believe that there's just going to be some thing out there flying around that all of a sudden just happens that nobody fucking knew about, because everything is planned. Everything.
Right.
And the reason I knew that this was not planned, and the rest of us were like, what the hell are we looking at, was when they announced over the top, or whatever the loudspeaker was called. There's all these fucking acronyms for that shit that I cannot remember. And whenever they called over the horn, they're calling for the Snoopy team. And the Snoopy team is that crew that's aboard that helicopter, and they're tasked with finding out what the hell shit is when it approaches. So we know that we don't know what the hell it is. And we know that we're about to go send a helicopter out to go check it out. And that's all we fucking know. And then the lights start to go off one at a time. About 10 minutes later, they come back. Same thing. Because, dude, we were camped out. So many of us were just standing by the hangar deck doors. I went and ate chow and came back, and they were still there. And I'm like, you guys still did it been there? And the guy's like, one dude who had an office kind of right around the corner from there, like up and over. And he was tasked with like signing out bullshit that's needed to tie down aircrafts. Okay. So each job in this military, everything you do in the military is like a written down, pain in the ass. So if I need, straps to strap down various, aircraft, the squadron doesn't show up with those straps. The aircraft carrier has those straps. So they go and get shit and they sign stuff out. So the people that know shit, that are right there by these doors and hangar bay, and everybody who works in the crow's nest and anybody anywhere is going, yeah, we saw some shit. We legit saw some shit. And then I'm going, is this like some sort of like, exercise? Is this like, right? This is some ops shit, right? So the whole time we're like, oh no, right? This is totally ops. But the thing that fucked us and made us all go, what the hell are we looking at, dude, was when they called out for aerial observation of whatever it is the fuck that's out there. And when you're seeing helicopter pilots and another crew of like ready men getting up there and in brown shirts going up to prep shit, and we do not have ordnance. I mean, I was an Ordy at the time. We're red shirt guys. We're just sitting around doing like fucking twiddling our thumbs and getting, bomb racks and shit ready and working on Brew 32s for fucking, the next squadron that'll show up. But we're not doing anything. So yeah, we fucking stood around and stared at this thing for like a good it was like an hour that these lights were just hanging around. And then
so I just want to pop in real quick here. It's interesting because the Bob Dolphin guy is getting, I think maybe I had a misunderstanding. I thought they were talking from an evolutionary standpoint, but I think they're just talking about in general symbiotic organisms infecting people and making them zombies or something. I thought they were making a very scientific, biological statement about evolution with the endosymbiotic relationships, but maybe not.
Real quick, John. So you say the lights kind of turned on one by one and then turned off. Like, did they turn off when like the helicopters went to go out there and check it out? So they never really got a chance. Is that about what happened?
Dude, there was a good half-hour time frame again, because the Snoopy team was like getting ready to do their thing, if you will. And they were heading out, and I'm like, man, this is going to be insane to see what this turns into. 10, 15 minutes, we're still standing there, and I'm like, bro, I'm going to go eat chow, And that was about the point where I go to eat and come back, and we're still looking at, lights that are on. Every once in a while, one of them would, like, turn off, but then it would come back. And then it was, like, again, 7 of them. But then when they all turned off at the same time, that was it. But during the time frame that they were illuminated, the 6 to 7 lights, if you will, definitely more than 5, but I gotta say 6 or 7 of them. So this is all illuminated, but at some point one of them might shut off, two of them might shut off. And I'm like, okay, dude, I just got out of, I mean, it's not like I forgot everything I knew. I mean, I know what signaling is, and I know that this isn't any sort of signal that I've fucking seen that we use. We have light signals that have flaps over the light that is like a Morse code, broken out into lights. I know that there's various lights for different colors, if you will, but this is just like, we don't use those out there in the ocean because light is your enemy in the ocean. There's red lights used on the ship at night because it's, red light doesn't emit the same as white light, so you can go from dark to a lit room if that lit room is all red. So you can use red lights all you want and then walk into the dark and see perfectly. And that's what's on the ship is just red lights. So it's like if you're seeing other ships, you would see these things like red lights because we have protocols like blanking ship where you got to shut all the fucking doors so none of the light escapes the ship. Just weird stuff like that. So to me, when you see these lights, I'm thinking to myself, this isn't just some accident with lights off a ship. This isn't signaling of lights from a ship because there's just so much protocol to this. You don't just fucking start flashing lights in the fucking middle of the night on the ocean, especially when you're a pre-commissioned ship out there doing deck trials. Do
you mind if I address this one comment here, David?
Oh yeah, go for it, man.
The gentleman in the top left, I said something about ops people. I didn't say anything about ops people, but I mean, I done some things with ops, not as a special ops person at all, but I mean, you're around them in the armed forces. We've done different training and exercises, but I guess we could have some of the people from that group I'm in who have, like we had Heiner on.
That's true.
Lead engineer. We could definitely have somebody on. I could have an intel. I could get an intel officer. That would be interesting.
Could be, man.
So I have a question. Was there an official report made, and did the helicopter make an official report?
I went to our chief, and I literally, Chief Bing, and I said to him, yo, dude, are we going to do something about this? Like, do we write down something, or do I have I want to because if there's a report, I want to write into it. Cause I hung out to watch this. I'm like, dude, this is 45 minutes to an hour of this thing.
Wow.
This is insane. You only get so much time to yourself. So I had to go eat and come back, or else I wouldn't have ate that day, And so that night when we're getting together for muster, I'm like, you see the lights, everybody. Oh, see the lights, you see the lights, you see the lights. We're going to do something about this. Nothing, man. Just nothing came of it.
Wow.
And that was the thing that just drove me nuts because now, I follow the CVN 76 on Facebook and stuff. And it's just a different Navy because I've commented on things and I've said stuff and I've been like, oh, hey, what about this? Or, and I've asked questions to the CVN's Facebook, their Facebook entities, because those are ran by sailors. Sailors now, there's a whole job being a photographer, media consultant, all these sorts of things do exist in the military. Hell, you could be in a Navy choir and sing Hakuna Matata and get a viral video. And I'm sitting here looking at all these sailors singing Hakuna Matata or whatever it was they were singing from The Lion King. And I'm like, this is a job in the Navy? What the hell? What the heck, man? From what you really wish that they would report this more at a scale to where there's some sort of log or record where even as a civilian, you'd be able to go back and look and say, there was an aerial event that occurred, over.
Well, that's
over
what they meetings about 9 months ago with the Congress. They had
the declassification.
But they have improved the you can in the military now without fear. Now I don't know how true it's going to be. Have any retribution for reporting what they call UAPs now, but they're trying to do the same. There's a guy fighting to have the same for airline pilots where they can report to some unusual sightings.
Yeah, other countries already do that.
there's got to be you know, the outlets. Again, AARO is open online. You could search that, aaro.mil. And so if and then even more so, if you guys want to you know, kind of centralize, again, I'm really going to push the Center for UFO Studies. That's CUFOS. Because they each state will have their own little group. And, you know, and it was funded by a guy out of Northern Illinois here, and he wasn't a military guy. He was an astronomer or astrologist, one of the two. But a learned individual, you know, a college professor put this together. And they are tasked with, or have tasked themselves with taking these reports seriously, sending field representatives out to collect data from the people who observed these various UAPs. So the men in black, if you will, are kind of real now through these small groups. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. Well, there you have it, guys. We got John 3 UFO sightings. That last one's very interesting. A lot of witnesses there on the Navy ship, aircraft carrier, and thanks for sharing the Anunnaki history, Charles. That was fascinating.
Interesting stuff.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, Anunnaki's some deep, great stuff. And people
Deep
highly
stuff.
recommend, get that Book of Enoch, get in there, read some Carlos Castaneda even.
Yeah, absolutely. The Book of Enoch. Yeah, that's a good one.
I got to read that. I got
Emerald
a copy
Tablets as
sent.
well.
Actually, my buddy Nick is in here. Last Man Standing is his handle, but yeah, he sent me that. I got to read that. So
good read. I've read it. Got to read that.
For sure.
A lot of books you need to read.
Yeah. Well, and I'll throw this out there for your listeners. If you guys want to follow or fall into some old rabbit holes, there's a lot of cool esoteric knowledge that comes from kind of fragments and scattered bits of what the wise men used to pass on, and they're generally passed on through what people will call rights of knowledge. So I mean, you know, if you become a Mason, you're gonna, you know, they have their own little version of it. If you join like the there's so many of them, but there's an Egyptian one in particular, and then there's also Scottish Rite and York Rite within Masonry. But there's just so many different of these little rites and groups that pass on this information. But the you know, it's kind of like the House of the Rising Sun. You know, there's a lot of different names to these groups, but esoteric knowledge goes just it correlates with this stuff so much. So I'm just going to recommend that people, you know, dig into these things, let the Wikipedia, you know, get you going. And when you find it, you're reading about Rosicrucians, and then next you're reading about, you know, Illuminati, you know, tidbits here and what they really were and these things. It's really interesting stuff. So, and I'm glad your listeners dig this stuff, dude. That's huge.
For sure. Thanks, guys, for joining. Hey, where could the listeners follow you guys to get, you know, more info and stuff you guys are involved with?
So I have NUFOA, the National UFO Association. I have that. That's on Facebook, and it's also on YouTube. I've actually had a chance to interview a few people, like from what's his name? Couple of these guys that were abducted and stuff like that from.
Like the Fire in the Sky guy, did you have that?
Yeah, Fire in the Sky, right? Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
I interviewed him, and he actually had a real claim to fame, which I will talk to you about on maybe on another show or something. But that's a big one. So sure. I had an opportunity of interviewing a few of those guys, and so NUFO with the National UFO Association. So, and we're looking for funding because I want to try to get a trip to Egypt. And there's some real good discoveries going on right now in Egypt, and a lot of good history coming up. And there's going to be some new stuff that's going to be very, very important to expose, and it's going to wake up people a lot.
Interesting. Yeah.
So yeah.
What about you, John? Where could people follow you?
Guys, I'm at Kilts and Handpans. I'm on some new stuff, man. I'm Kilts and Handpans on everything. That's TikTok, X, YouTube, all that good stuff. But I also run Mixic Productions, and Mixic Productions is gets involved. We do various podcasts, and I also do a lot of different distributions and stuff like that. So we've got a couple. I've got a podcast coming up called Random Chats with Johnny D. I'm working on getting guests and putting together that synopsis for that whole show line out. And as far as Mixic goes, I've got my hands in selling kilts and selling handpans. So distribution is actually going really good, and I'm pumped about it. So people can find me at Mixic Productions, pretty much anywhere on Facebook at that too, and all the good stuff. And so my link tree is assigned to kilts and handpans. So that's all the good stuff. And yeah, thanks so much, guys, for having me on. And Charlie, I really appreciate you up there. Brian, man, you the man. And then Viking, thank you so much, dude. I appreciate this opportunity.
And you guys could find Brian pretty much wherever I'm at.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, somebody join my channel. I got like 176 people.
What's your channel?
Brian the Beast, man.
Brian the Beast.
There you go.
Yeah, you gotta come.
I gotta join.
I lost 2 people and gained 2 people the last one. What kind of
Yeah, you're not getting growth, man. It's
Yeah.
evened out.
Everybody got to go over, join my channel. Look, you can troll me over there. The trolls in here, go over there, write whatever you want. I don't care. Tell me how horrible I am. Whatever you want. Just get my comments up. I don't care.
Okay,
There
there
you
you have
go.
it, man. All right, thanks everyone.
All right. Thanks for having me. Take care, guys.
All right. Take care, my friends.
All right. Good night.